obviously there will be an element of this mismanagement, except if there are external shocks which are beyond the control of the particular country. But in the case of the NDC in 2015, when they applied for the IMF support facility, it was clear that the economy was in systematic decline, and the figures are quite evident. Growth was about 3.4%. Debt to GDP ratio was very high. The budget deficit was also very high. Inflation was around 15.4%. So in the worsening trajectory that they found themselves, the only option was to go to the IMF. And the package that they sought speaks clearly to the fact that the purpose and the reason for going to the IMF was so serious that it was not just a first aid support that was to be given to them. Because if there's a trajectory of underperformance of the economy, then obviously you need a bigger package to support you. In our case, as I seem to have suggested in my earlier comment, and the data shows clearly, that you had an economy, post-COVID economy, that registered a growth rate of 5.4%.
2021, you mean?
2021.
In Ghana?
End-year growth rate.
5.4%.
4%.
Higher than 2016's 3.4.
Yes. But even before then, the more revealing fact about this is that we inherited an economy that was under an IMF program. Now, 2017, within a period of 18 months, we were able to move the economy from 3.4% growth to 8.1% within a period of 18 months. After the first year in office, we were able to exit from the IMF program, I would say creditably. Now, this is significant also because at the time we were exiting, all the economic indicators which were in disequilibrium were pointing in the right direction. Inflation had scaled down from 15.4% to single digits. Likewise, the debt, fiscal debt, and then also the debt to GDP ratio. So these are indicators pointing to a very significant turnaround of the economy, even when the country was in an IMF program. So fast forward, if at the end of 2019, you were registering 7% growth, single-digit inflation, with a budget deficit 5.4%, then obviously this is an economy that was thriving. And even interestingly, whilst we were working ourselves out of the IMF program, we also decided to embark on the transformation of the economy. Because, Paul, the only guarantee against going back and forth to the IMF, which has occurred to this country over 17 times, is to be able to transform structurally your economy such that a number of things happen. That you are able to build very strong reserves with your central bank, that you are able to tame inflation, that you are able to reduce your debt to what we call sustainable limits. And then also to be able to achieve trade surplus, meaning that you are exporting more than you are importing. For the first time in the history of our country, within the first term of office of our government, we're able to achieve a trade surplus. So if by the end of 2019, we had such remarkable results from managing our economy, and then also being able to exit from the IMF. And then all of a sudden, in 2020, your growth rate declines dramatically to 0.5% from an average of 7%. Then obviously, there must have been some external forces that would have contributed to that. And that is why we talk about the fact that what has taken us, the conditions that have taken us to the IMF is entirely different from the conditions that took the NDC in 2015 to the IMF. Theirs was a situation of a systematic decline in the economy, and which was why they required an extended credit facility to be able to support the recovery of the economy. In our case, imagine a situation where you have such remarkable performance to the extent that Ghana becomes the most attractive investment destination in West Africa and second in Africa. So if something happens within a matter of 3 to 6 months, it could only be attributed to circumstances beyond the control of the country. And that is what is explained by the combined effect of the Ukraine war and then the COVID pandemic. But if I may just add that whilst we're working ourselves out of the IMF program, and whilst we were taking all these decisions to stabilize our macroeconomy, we also decided to embark on a very aggressive program for economic transformation. One, beginning with industrial transformation. I mean, people hear about the One District, One Factory as the flagship component of our industrial transformation agenda. Yes, it is probably the most acknowledged component of the transformation, because what it seeks to do is now to build an industrial base of our economy to do 3 things. First, to be able to substitute local production for imports, that's import substitution, so that we can produce many of the things that we are importing. Secondly, also, to be able to add value to the natural resource endowment of every district, so that it's not industry just for Tema, Accra, Kumasi, and so on and so forth. And also to be able to export more and add to our foreign exchange reserves. And so you can see from the results, unparalleled in the history of our country since independence, that government is supporting the private sector to be able to establish these enterprises around the country. And as I speak now, to date, as of June 2020, we have 296 factories at various stages of implementation.
The NDC doesn't believe that.
Yes, and then out of that, 125 are currently operational. The NDC talks about it, and I've been to Parliament on several occasions to answer questions. They are unable to undermine the credibility of the program, because this is not about government establishing state enterprises. These are privately owned companies that have been established by the risk capital and ingenuity of Ghanaian entrepreneurs. So whether you like it or not, whether you politicize it or not, it's not about the government. But government created the environment to stimulate the interest of the private sector.
Okay. Let's take one factory. Let's take a Kumfi juice, for instance.
Yes.
So if you want to use a Kumfi juice to explain what you are saying, who owns a Kumfi juice?
Oh, it's a private company. It's a private. There's no government interest.
Government doesn't have interest in it.
No. The
but
government
who gave them
no
the money?
Yes, so the incentives, and that's where the government factor comes in. Because if all these factories would have happened, they would have happened earlier than now. Mm-hmm. So government decided in supporting these companies to do a number of things. One is that we provide an interest subsidy to the banks to be able to provide competitive interest rates to the one factory. So for example, whilst the average interest rate will be about 22%, the interest subsidy provides loans through the banks at 10%.
It means government will pay the rest?
Yes, government pays the subsidy. Okay. Yes, pays the subsidy.
So people who want to set up factories can get access to these loans?
Yes, you can. Once you go through the review process and you are, as it were, accredited as a 1D1F company, then you are supported by one of our participating banks with a loan facility at an interest rate of 10%, which has been subsidized by the government.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
then
so these 120 factories you talk about, they are privately owned?
You're privately owned.
Facilitated by government?
Facilitated by government.
That were not working before, but are working now?
Yes, so 60% of these one factory projects I'm talking about are new companies. And 40% are existing companies that were literally, collapsing or had collapsed.
Oh, so that's what the NDC says. You're actually just turning around existing companies and calling them new companies.
But Paul, let's face it. We are talking about one district, one factory. I know you come from
Kwamo.
Now, if there is an existing factory in Kwamo that is facing severe challenges because of doing so, because of the poor economic conditions during the NDC period, and government is now talking about supporting entrepreneurs to establish industries in every district to improve livelihoods across the country. Would it make sense that if there's an existing factory in your district, that because you want to establish a new one, you abandon that same Ghanaian entrepreneur whom you can support to revive his factory, and then you go and establish a new one? It doesn't make sense. So the program has always been clear. It is for both new industries and existing industries that would need.
So when you take a company like, say, Afanco 1968,
yes,
that has been doing
Afanco.
Egg crates.
Yes, you know about Afanco?
Yes.
Wow, and it looks like you.
Yeah, we read about them.
Yes.
Very old company. That's why they do the egg crates.
Yes.
What do you do with them? Because I see now they are sort of coming back. They're advertising.
Yes, absolutely. So the problem of Afanco for many years had been the technology that they were using. They were doing well when they were established, but with the improvements in technology, for them to be competitive, they needed to retool their company. And to retool, you need financing. And so that is why they would be an ideal candidate for 1D1F. So it's across the board, different sectors. About, again, 65 to 70% of the 1D1F companies are agro-processing companies. But there are others in different sectors.
Let's talk about, I would like to talk about the minister talked about, the Minister of Finance has been talking about automobile and all that. I'd like to talk about that. But Commander, where would you situate Commander in this conversation? Is it a 1D1F? Is it a government company? What is it?
Yeah, so Commander was inherited by our government in 2017.
But it's an
From
old,
the previous,
it's an Nkrumah factory.
It's a, yes.
Or it's a Buzia factory.
It's a state enterprise that was established
to produce sugar.
To produce sugar for the local market, hopefully for the export market. Now, it's had a long history. Checks, balances, somehow did not provide the right environment for them to survive over the years. And also the old model of a state enterprise did not help them. So fast forward, when the NDC came into office, they took a loan of over $35 million to try and retool the factory. Now, this retooling exercise was completed around May, June 2016, and it was commissioned. Now, immediately it was commissioned, it stopped production. That is, after the production test run, they could not sustain production for a number of reasons. One, because in the planning process for the factory, there was no provision for the supply of sugarcane on a sustainable basis. I'm talking about sustainable basis. If you go and
supply
harvest
the sugarcane, the fruit.
Yes, the sugarcane. Yeah. If you go and harvest 1 ton, 2 tons of sugarcane and use it to commission a plant, that does not guarantee the continuous working on the years. So that was the first challenge. The second challenge was that at the time that it was commissioned, regrettably, a significant number of components that would have allowed it to work properly were not installed. So when we took over, we did a technical audit and realized that there were all these significant challenges. But we also wanted to give the benefit of the doubt to the previous government. So we went through the process of understanding where the company was. And we realized that they had made an effort to attract an investor, a strategic investor, to run and manage the factory. So that's fine. We are a responsible government. If it is working, why not? If it is not working and you have an investor, then, I mean, we would still work with the investor. But when we invited that strategic investor that had gone through the process and had been offered a commander to as it were, to own and manage, they were no longer interested in taking up that offer because according to them, the amount that they originally bid for taking over the factory, and after the bid offer and the negotiations, they realized that the true value of the factory was significantly below the book value.
What they had been told.
What they had been told, So they refused the offer to continue. So subsequent to that, we also made efforts to get some new strategic investors. The unfortunate thing was that every other new investor that was interested in taking over Commander were putting the value of the company at around 12 to 20 million US dollars. Any other investor that was quoting at the time of the offer more than 20 million US dollars later on came back to indicate that the factory was overvalued, and so they were not interested. So we've gone back and forth, trying to find a strategic investor. And Yoko decided to undertake a forensic audit of the factory because of all these, challenges associated with undervaluation and things like that. And the initial report from the forensic audit puts the value of the company at around $60 million US dollars, as against the book value of $35 million US dollars. So that has been the fundamental reason why it has been difficult to attract any strategic investor. Anybody who comes in initially is excited. They do their own audit and realize that the value is less than what is posted in the books. So we took a decision after struggling to find a strategic investor to allow the management, board and management of the company as a commercial entity, because it's a private company.
But it's 100% government owned?
Government owned,
okay.
But it's a private company. So we agreed with the management and the board to take over the management of the company as a 1D, 1F project and use the incentives now to retool and recapitalize the company so that we can at least continue to support the the people of Commander. So right now, this process is about 98% complete, and hopefully by the end of July, we'll do the production test run, and then.
So when will it be back on stream?
So anytime after, let's say, end of July, beginning of August, it will become operational again.
And Ghanaians will get sugar from Commander?
Yes, and after that.
But do you have the sugar cane now?
Well, so we'll do a combination where, of course, it takes time to grow the cane. So in the interim, we will start with some crushing.
What is crushing?
Crushing of sugar cane. That's using sugar cane.
The sugar cane you have now?
The sugar cane that we are going to buy from farmers
okay.
around, yes. And then complement that with imported raw sugar. So
raw sugar?
Raw sugar, imported raw sugar.
What is raw sugar?
Yeah, raw sugar is raw sugar. I mean, that,
so
has,
the one
not been,
we
that
have...
has not been, yes, no. Raw sugar has not gone through the refinery process. So it's the primary stage of crushing.
But it cannot be
the
eaten?
sugar cane. No.
It cannot be eaten?
No, it has to go through the refinery process.
But it's cheaper to import that one than to import finished sugar?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so you import that one,
you serve,
Commander will refine it, and then you sell it locally?
Yeah, you sell it locally.
Cheaper than what will be imported?
But it will be, the main thrust is to now ensure that we have a plantation. We will start buying from our growers. That process is already underway. And then start crushing, and then complement it with imported raw.
When will you be able to say that you have cane in Ghana that is feeding the factory?
So we are now acquiring 20,000 acres of land to start the plantation, so that we'll have a sustainable supply of sugar cane.
When will that come round? Because the cane takes a while to grow.
Yes, so whilst that is going on between 2 years and 2.5 years, we will still buy from outgrowers.
But the factory will be operational.
It
will employ people.
Yes, that is, for us, that is our interest, to make sure that what we inherited as a white elephant, that we'll be able now to make it operational, and then reduce the importation of sugar. That is our major thrust. As to how we reconcile the figures, how come factory that is valued at over $35 million US dollars is significantly lower in value, right from commissioning.
Will it employ a lot of people? When people hear factory, they think it will employ 100 people, 200 people.
Yes.
These days, technology has come in. Will it employ a lot of people?
Well, but you realize that for agro-processing, the jobs that are generated are not just what we call the direct factory jobs, but the indirect jobs. And then also, by extension, the plantation or farming operations, the jobs come from the farming operations. So for a Kumfi, for Commander, for all these other agro-processing jobs, that is what we call. But Paul, I think let's get back on track to the
Yes, so
IMF.
I was going to come to
Yes.
you about IMF. What is the, for you as a senior official of the government, what is the hope that we can come out of the IMF program the way we did in 2019 with the program we are signing up now?
Yes. Whilst we were working towards exiting from the program of the IMF in 2017, we also decided to introduce what we call transformation programs in various sectors. So we introduced in the agricultural sector the planting for food and jobs, and we don't have enough time to go into the details of it. But we made sure that the transformation in agriculture would occur as part of the general program to expand the production and productivity base of our economy, which is the only way that would avoid a situation where the country goes back to the IMF. So we spent to date about almost $3 billion US dollars on that.
On planting for food and jobs?
But there's planting for food and jobs, there's planting for export and rural development.
On all the agri programs?
On all the
$3 billion?
Yes, 3 billion, no, 3 billion
Cedis.
Ghana cedis.
Has it yielded something?
Well, if we had the time, I'll show you the figures in terms of the increase in tonnage. Because right now we are a net exporter of grains.
Grains, which one? Maize?
Maize in particular.
People complain that the prices of food in the market is high.
But that's another discussion. Let's stay on course. And then, so the agricultural transformation program alone would enhance agricultural production and productivity and contribute to the transformation that we are talking about. Number two is our industrial transformation program. You know, for over a century, we've depended almost exclusively on cocoa and gold. Now we've identified 10 new strategic anchor sectors which will diversify our economy away from cocoa. So one of it is what you just talked about, the vehicle assembly sector.
Is it to become an export product?
Both for the domestic market and the export, and for the export market. So there's the auto industry, that's new. We are also now developing a petrochemical industry. There's private sector investment now in a very big refinery, which will soon come on stream, because it's through the petrochemical industry that you get fertilizers, you get plastics, you get bitumen, and government already is in a joint venture transaction with a major global fertilizer producer. So that's all part of the petrochemical industry that we are developing. We are also now aggressively promoting the pharmaceutical industry because we import over almost 70% of our requirements for pharmaceutical products. So it's now not just cocoa, it is pharmaceuticals, it's the petrochemical industry, it's the vehicle assembly industry, it is the industrial salt industry, which would help us establish a caustic soda plant. It is also a garment and textile industry. We are also aggressively promoting that. We've started promoting the oil palm industry. So these are now 10 new strategic anchor industries, which are the foundation of our industrial transformation agenda. So whilst this is going on in agriculture, in industry, we also decided to introduce reforms in the financial sector. And already we've spent over 21 billion Ghana cedis in the financial sector reform, both in terms of cleaning up the banks and then also increasing the liquidity of the banks. And that is significant expenditure. And then we've gone beyond that We are also making sure that we have energy sector reform. And we've spent almost 12 billion Ghana cedis, in making sure that we meet all our commitments under the old power purchase agreements that were signed by the previous government. So we've made commitments also in that regard. And we're also introducing reforms in infrastructure development, in the road sector, in the railway sector, in the aviation sector. We made sure that we completed Terminal 3. We've almost finalized the construction of the Kumasi International Airport. So all these reforms have been going on since 2017. So this is what underpins the transformation of our economy and would allow us to be able to support the economy in a way that would avoid a situation of going back to the IMF.
Okay.
So that is why, if it had not been for COVID and the Ukraine conflict, we would have been on safe grounds.
Okay, let's talk about the automobile industry. Just spend 2 minutes for people to understand that. What happens there? So VW are here. They are in the industrial area. They have a factory. They are manufacturing cars. Technology transfer, is it happening? How many Ghanaians work there? What kind of caliber of Ghanaians work there? Where are the cars being sold? Have they been sold to Ghanaians? Is government buying some of the cars? What's really happening there? We see the beautiful photographs that every now and then Kyerematen is commissioning one of them.
No, I know. I mean, this will be too detailed a discussion for
But is it worthwhile? Is it employing people?
So right now, we have about 6 of the leading automobile companies, Nissan, Toyota, Volkswagen, Kia, Hyundai, Isuzu.
With a presence here?
Yes, with a presence here.
A proper presence?
Those that are already in commercial production, Isuzu, Volkswagen, Toyota, and then Nissan. Now, in addition to that, we have our own local automobile giant, Kantanka, that is also producing their own brands. And the impact and the effect of government's policy on the auto assembly, on Kantanka's operation, is so significant that it validates a government's decision to support this new sector. So it is not just about the assembly operations. We are also now attracting investors into component manufacturing so that we can now produce the components that feed into the assembly plants. And that alone is a multi-billion-dollar program. So again, all these new strategic anchor industries, as I was explaining, are transforming our economy, and that is what gives it the foundation to be able to support inclusive growth and sustainable growth. If you want to avoid going back to the IMF, there has to be evidence that you've spent good money on the transformation of the country. And this is what I was referring to. If we had more time, we could go
into let's deal with the... So what is your confidence level that Ghana will get back out of the IMF before the next election?
Before
the next election, which is December 2024.
Yes, so as you are aware, the fund officials are here, and we're now going to engage in discussions and negotiations on the kind of package that will best suit our conditions as of now. But unless we finish with the negotiations, it will be difficult to give you a precise answer on that, because the nature of the program that will determine. Yes. But be sure that with the transformation agenda that I've just spoken to you about, and with the support from the IMF, we would be able to exit creditably in the same way that we're able to exit from from the IMF when we took over.
But would it be
maybe
before the next election?
This might be a good point to explain a little bit as to the value or the benefits of going to the IMF. First, it will provide liquidity support and balance of payment support. You know, currently, we are still servicing our external and domestic debts. But then, what you need to avoid is a situation where you use all your reserves to be able to service your debts. And so, by seeking for liquidity support, balance of payment support from the fund, you are, as it were, increasing your reserves to help you stabilize the economy, be able to import critical items needed for development, and at the same time be able to service your debt without necessarily constraining your reserves. So that is the major reason why, in our case, we are going to the fund for that liquidity support. But then the real value does not lie in the limited amount of money that you get for liquidity assistance. It lies in the fact that by going into an IMF program, you are able now to what we call catalyze support from other friendly countries to support your transformation agenda. So Egypt, for example, went for support from IMF, but were able to attract over 13 billion US dollars from friendly countries, just because they have a program, IMF program, supporting their national agenda. And I think this is very important. In addition, part of the challenge of a depreciating currency is that anytime investors who hold your securities, your bonds, other securities, start disinvesting, then there's an outflow of foreign currency. Because, for example, you go to the Eurobond market, your securities are supposed to run for maybe a 15-year term. If investors, because of the dynamics of the post-COVID and Ukraine war, if they start taking out their investments before the scheduled term, then it means that you are losing more forex, which then puts pressure on your local
because they are not
currency.
Their confidence level is waning. That's why they are selling
because
off.
Of the
they're
dynamics,
asking for their money. They're calling for it
because of the dynamics occasioned by the conflict. Because now everybody is hedging. You understand me? Now, if you're an investor, because of the challenges, you also want now probably to protect your money. Now, to be able to avoid a continuous run on your reserves, that liquidity support from the IMF then creates and increases the confidence level of investors that if the IMF is providing the liquidity support to Ghana for debt servicing, then I don't need to take out my money because it will be there anytime I want it. I don't need to be worried about the effects of the pandemic, of the Ukraine war. You know, once the IMF is backing the country and they can service their debts, then I'll still hold on to the securities. I don't need to demand my money. Once they do that, then the reserves of the central bank would not be depreciated. And then the currency basically then comes back to a point of stabilization. Because we are a highly import-driven economy, the moment your currency depreciates, then you need more local currency for the same amount of foreign exchange. And then it means that you are actually paying more, and that puts a strain on, and that's exactly what has been happening. So you can be sure then that once you have this liquidity support, and once you have the catalyzing effect of other development partners, the friends of Ghana, now pulling additional resources together to support Ghana's transformation agenda, then the depreciation of the cedi will wane, you stabilize your currency, and that is linked to inflation. Inflation also will start coming down. And then also, because you have been growing your economy now through the private sector, 1D, 1F, these new strategic anchor industries. Because remember, all these transformation programs, they take time to yield results, minimum 2 or 3 years, you know. So this is just the right time where the benefits and the fruits of the loans that we took to finance all these transformation programs will start yielding results. And then that will then come just at the time when, by the support of the IMF, stabilizing your currency, building your reserves, then all the benefits will start reinforcing each other, and you come back to equilibrium. So the difference between where we are now and the NDC is because there's clear evidence that the kind of transformation that is going on in this country did not occur during the NDC period. And so it means that we have built the foundation to be able to be more self-reliant. It is also clear from what I've described, and if you look at the figures, that whilst there was a decline, systematic decline in the economy, which took the NDC to ask for support. In our case, it is what is described as force majeure. These are factors exogenous and external to our country. How is it that an economy that is achieving consistent growth, 7% and above, single-digit inflation, fiscal deficit of 5% slightly above, how can that be described as an economy in distress? This is 2019. So if you jump into 2020 and suddenly the figures start changing, then obviously you should be clear that it is driven by external factors which you have no control over. But people don't even realize that even in spite of COVID, the economy grew by 5.4% in 2021. So the evidence is clear. You cannot compare this to the time that the NDC went to the IMF for support. Even at the end of 2021, the economy was growing. So if in February the Ukraine-Russia conflict occurs, fuel prices, energy prices go up, food prices go up because between Russia and Ukraine, they control 30% of wheat production, and then sunflower oil, maize production. How is it that you cannot attribute the disequilibrium, the dislocation in terms of the economy to the fact that as at the end of December 2021, post-COVID, you were still doing well. In May, from 7.5% inflation in May 2021, even post-COVID, May 2021, 7.5%, even December 2021, single-digit inflation, 9.9%. Then all of a sudden, by May 2022, you are at 25% inflation. Obviously, you have to look at, so what could have caused this? And then it's clear.
So it's not mismanagement.
Inflationary pressures from not just COVID, but particularly the Ukraine conflict is clearly the driving factor for this. So I think that we need to have, I would say, a conversation that has a national focus, and it's not about NDC, it's not about NPP. You know, we as Ghanaians need to understand what has gone on, and not start talking about the fact that, you know, you went to IMF and now you say you won't go, you are going. The point is that what has driven us to the IMF now, if we all appreciate that these were factors beyond our control, external factors beyond our control. If 100 other countries that also belong to the IMF have sought the same kind of assistance, why should we single Ghana out? And the point is that, as I said, we all have our money there. It's our bank. You know, going for support, there's nothing negative about going for IMF support. And interestingly also, the conditionalities that are normally associated with an IMF program, these are conditionalities for what we call fiscal consolidation. That is how you control your expenditure and how you improve your revenue mobilization. That's the only way you can bring an economy into equilibrium. So we are not going to sit there for the IMF to dictate every single aspect of the program. In fact, they are only supporting the program that we would present to them, which is our enhanced domestic program. And as I've explained to you, from 2017, we have crafted a very comprehensive program of transformation. It's not that we are now going to think through, so what are we going to do to get out of the IMF? All these programs, projects that I talked about, they are all moving at the same time. AFCFTA is there. We are basically harvesting the benefits of being the new commercial capital of Africa. So, yes, I can understand the fact that there's some kind of anxiety about our situation now. But this is what I've been seeking to explain. First, because of the driving forces and the causes and the fact that what will take us out of the IMF support program is what we have done before from 2017.
So we are ready with a clear
we are
route to exit.
We are ready with the program that we have already been implementing. And so what we need is to make sure that that liquidity support from the IMF guarantees that investors will no longer be, I would say, will not find the situation now destabilizing, because they know that once you have an IMF program, then they can still keep their investments. And then you can then use your reserves to support your economic agenda apart from servicing your debt.
So another important matter, Honorable Minister, is that people are worried that this IMF engagement will then, the conditionalities you talked about, they may say cancel free SHS, cancel TVET, cancel school feeding, those social interventions which are a big budget on the national budget. From what you know, are we running that risk?
I would say that already any fund program, IMF fund program, regardless whatever package it comes with, would always ensure that social interventions are not compromised.
I see.
By the implement. It's a normal standard practice of IMF funded programs. Because by trying to stabilize the economy, they want to also ensure that there's inclusive growth. So that is part of their normal architecture, the World Bank program architecture. But then what I can foresee is that we ourselves as a country because of the destabilizing effect of the COVID, of the Ukraine conflict war, we may have to review the implementation of some of these flagship programs. Because obviously, if you have had some negative impact of these external forces, it makes sense that it provides an entry point for you to start reviewing the implementation of this. So there will be, but it is not possible that all of a sudden, because you go to IMF, that all the things that you have started, which is what can take you out of the IMF program, that they are discontinued. It is possible that through the review, you may have to scale down
But review
temporarily.
Review means what?
The review is that, let's say you are funding free SHS up to, let's say, a certain amount, and you are building. And remember, if with a reform program, it is not just about free SHS. It's also about expanding school infrastructure.
Yes, a lot
See,
of it.
all the things I've talked about, whether it's industrial, agricultural transformation, roads or infrastructure transformation, energy sector transformation, all this costs money. You know, all this costs money. You have to borrow to be able to support that. It's either you are mobilizing revenue from domestic sources, including taxes, or you are borrowing to complement your revenues. So if out of what has happened to you through these external forces, you have to review and scale down certain components. So for example, if we're going to build 10 schools, you may decide that within the constraints imposed by the pandemic and the Ukraine conflict, so you may want to build maybe 5. But the way economists work is that there's a medium-term framework. You have your your annual budget, which is your annual operational plan, but you also have a medium-term framework. So with or without the IMF or any external funding agency, we already have a medium-term economic management framework which restores us to macroeconomic stability by 2025. It's not anybody imposing that on us. So we already have the elements of a macroeconomic stabilization program, except that because of the effects of the external forces, we need a little support to ensure that we can maintain a reasonable level of operations and performance of our flagship programs. So people should not harbor the sentiments that an IMF program would mean the end to all our flagship programs. We'll review. In some cases, we may put more emphasis and more focus on some of the flagship programs, reduce some, so that you put everything into equilibrium. I mean, my hope, for example, is that with the disruption in global supply chains, both occasioned by the conflict and the COVID, that as a government, that we will now put more resources into our industrial transformation agenda. Because it is clear that that is the way forward for our economy. The evidence all over the world is that the most, I would say, powerful economies are also the most industrialized. So with the modest gains that we've made with our new strategic anchor industries, with the 1D1F program, I didn't mention this, but we also have a very comprehensive program for SME development. Currently, we have 67 business resource centers spread across the country. And so the emphasis now is not somebody leaving school and wanting to work in government. The emphasis now is that let us create an institutional support infrastructure so that individuals can now walk into these institutions, and we call them the business resource centers, 67 of them, and then 169 business advisory centers. So all of the country, young people can now walk into these centers, which are one-stop enterprise centers. And instead of looking for a job, now you can have some support, hand-holding support, to help you either think through a business that you want to start or to expand your existing business. And in addition to that, we also have 40 technology solution centers, all part of the ministry's program, spread across the country, which will provide technology solutions to enterprises all over Ghana. If you have a factory, there's a missing component, you don't have to come to Swami or Accra, Kokompe, to be looking for that part. Right at the doorstep, you can walk into one of these technology solution centers. So there's a lot going on. I think part of our challenge is the communication gap. And if we can ensure that what we have been doing since 2017 is properly communicated, to the people of this country, then we will have less anxiety about not being able to exit from the IMF program. The future is bright for our country, and my appeal to Ghanaians is that let us move forward together with hope, because we've taken the country out of the IMF before. We've gone there for external reasons, and so we know how to get us back on track out of the IMF program.
Okay, so a final question now. Kyerematen for president, it shows on social media, it shows everywhere. The party is getting ready to elect a new leader. You are in the reckoning, incidentally, among the top 2 to become the MPP's leader for 2024's elections. How is that going?
Paul, I'm an old horse in this game. And I feel that where we are as a country, particularly at this very critical juncture, that conversation becomes less critical and important than us trying to work together to see how, as a country, we agree on the kind of package that we can get from the IMF and how we can work ourselves out. That conversation, that we'll have that conversation, and I'm ready anytime.
But there's not a time for that.
Well, I think our focus now as a country, it doesn't matter which party you belong to. It doesn't matter whether you have an affiliation to a potential candidate or aspirant. I think now the time is for us to think together and to build Ghana back together.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. And that was Honorable Alan Kyerematen, Minister for Trade and Industry.
All right, you're welcome back. So that was the interview that was conducted by Paul Adom Otchere with Alan Kyerematen as a member of the economic management team of this administration. Most of your messages are coming through, so let me just go straight to, we don't have a lot of time, but I can pick some messages, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'll start with Michael. Michael.
Great. So we're still waiting for that message you mentioned. So this is from Kofi in England. He says, Paul, please ask Alan about the cassava factory under his leadership during President Kufuor's time. My family gave the then president about 400 acres around Kaswa for the project in 2003. Akwesun Kumasi says, what Nana Addo is doing now with 1D1F is what Houphouët Boigny did in the Ivory Coast some 60 years ago. And today the Ivory Coast is more industrialized than Ghana. He says, if each previous government had added 100 factories, would there be so much unemployment in Ghana? Now, this is from Kofi in the UK. He says, hello, Paul. Alan is my man. This excuse must stop. We could have solved these many problems within this 6 years. I wish him well to lead us into 2024. It is his time. May a support of the president or the swap. There's a comment here on the Commander Sugar Factory. I think we addressed it. And so these ones are from Asante Adrimbone Thomas. He says, Vice President for 2014. Bawumia or Alan Cash versus government official 1 on 7 December 2024. He says Muhammad doesn't stand a chance. And Prince Otchere Williams says this man is the only hope for the Kukudu party. Oheneba Akwesi Frimpong says the only man Ghanaians listen to, Chief Allen. Great. Yes, that's it for now.
Okay, so let's go to Millie Intali.
Okay, so now coming from Prince David Ocho, Alan Kyerematen is Alan Kyerematen has a very wonderful personality. Everyone likes him and we can't wait to have him as president of Ghana. From Haruna Jibro, Alan is the only credible and marketable personality to the NPP. No doubt about that. From Kobe GH, Paul is doing tremendously well. The level he has taken this show is top class. God bless your hard work for giving us the best and credible political show in the country. From Daniel Ehim, I love your current affairs show. Ghanaians should vote for Kennedy Japan. Watching you live from Virginia, USA. From Obriya Josephine, Alan Kyerematen, the global icon. And finally from Samuel Ohime, Paul has educated many of us. Many people in Ghana were ranting about Boris resigning. Meanwhile, he only resigned from the party. You are an inspiration, Paul.
Also coming from Prince David Otchere. Paul, see how patient Alan Kyerematen is in explaining matters concerning the IMF. I'm sure he will lead Ghana with the same patience and kindness, with a forever smiling face. God bless Alan Kyerematen. Also coming from Ata Asiedu, we shouldn't entertain any hot-tempered politician. Alan is the man for the job. He even speaks like President Akufo-Addo. Also coming from President Kufuor, Also coming from Prince David Otchere again. The work that Honorable Alan Kyerematen has done with the one district, one factory is deserving of praise. I'm sure when he becomes president, there will be factories springing up everywhere. Also from Atso Amache Sam, Honorable Alan has done himself harm by staying too long away from the media. Great explanations. And lastly, from Abdul Ghaffar Abubakar Subini, what a diplomatic and decent submission. In fact, Alan Cash has no challenger. You deserve the president of Ghana.
Right, that is Chrissy also there, and Tilly, thank you. Michael, there's a message from a former executive of Commander Sugar Factory. What's he saying?
Yes,
Vani Amwa, I guess.
Yes, former secretary of the Commander Sugar Factory Project Management Board. He says, good evening, Annie and the crew. Honorable Alan Kyerematen should tell Ghanaians how much money are they using to renovate the Commander Sugar Factory. Why have they spent over 5 years without growing sugarcane, as they accuse the NDC? And he continues, I will expose his deception in the coming week. This is from Ransford Vani Amwa, a former secretary of the Commander Sugar Project Management Board.
Oh, so we should be expecting something from his quarters.
I suppose so.
Well, all right, Vani, thank you for that. And thank you, team, for the interesting messages that you've given me. And thank you to the viewers also for keeping faith with us. We've been with you, and Paul also coming through from the UK. This has been Good Evening Ghana. This is what time will allow us. Thank you so much for being with us. We're back definitely next week for some more interesting education and information from this platform. Thanks for watching, and good night.